Hello, everyone, and welcome to God Talks. Tonight we have Chaplain Emily Linderman, who's going to be our guest for tonight. I got a chance to meet Emily about 10 years ago, and one of my favorite stories about Emily is meeting me at a coffee shop to consider joining this new church start with this new young pastor who was trying to figure out exactly what I was doing. And I had been praying for a member who was actually not going to stress me out more than I was already stressed as a new pastor. And the Holy Spirit delivered Emily Linderman. And I remember in that conversation a couple of things. Emily reminded me that she was not looking for someone to take care of her, and that she wanted to essentially have a relationship of mutuality. And I think even before she left that coffee shop, I was trying to get her to sign up for membership because it was something that was so desperately needed. Now, at Stanford, she's actually studying or in a training process to be a CPE educator, essentially to take the work that she's already been doing as a chaplain and to help others who feel that same vocation. So, very excited tonight to bring to God Talks one of my favorite people in the world, the newly minted Reverend Emily Linderman. Hi, Emily.
Hi. You flatter me.
Well,
Aw.
it's all true, and you didn't even have to pay me for it. It just it just so happened. So, Emily, one, I just want to thank you for. I think your in I think intentional connection to spirit. You were supposed to be on God
Mm,
Talks at the beginning of June, and that same night, I was choosing to go and be a part of the uprisings with some of our youth here in Omaha. And I
hmm.
feel like even before I texted you, you already called me and was like, I have a feeling, do you need to do this tonight or can we reschedule? And I
Yeah.
think that's just a testament, I think, to who you
Mm.
are and your thoughtfulness and I think attention to the Spirit. So thank you for being
Mm.
here. You are, as you would say, you are here at the right time, at the right for this day and this hour,
As
as you
you
have
would say.
completely joined in that. So I'm going to jump right in
Yeah.
and ask you. I've shared a little bit about you, but I want to reflect back to your ordination and the fact that
Mm.
you chose to have a very ecumenical and interfaith participation in your ordination. And so my
Hmm.
question is, tell me how might I believe that there was a rabbi who offered you a blessing. If she was
Yeah.
to describe you to the folks watching God Talks tonight, what do you think she might say? How would she describe Emily?
Uh, I love that question. Um, we like to talk about Jesus. So I think she would say, I'm curious. So I really wanted to know, like, as a rabbi, how does she think of Jesus? And so I think she would describe me as curious, open hearted. Uh, Alongside curious, I have more of a sharp edge to my curiosity sometimes. I get more inquisitive, and um, I think that comes out in the team that I'm on. Um, Highly participatory, like maybe to the point that I need to like pull back a bit. And we sing together. So Lori, the rabbi that you're talking of, she sings in a threshold choir. So she sings to people as they're dying. And so sometimes we have dreams of singing to the hospital, of creating a spiritual care choir. And we can't do that right now in the era of COVID. But yeah, she would say, I'm joyful and I like to sing.
Which you do and do very, very well. I'm curious, Emily, right now in your life, having just been ordained,
Yeah.
what is your personal vision and mission?
I want the spirit of my ordination to exist everywhere possible. And I don't mean my ordination, I mean the spirit of multiple belonging. That's the phrase that you use that I've adopted since then. And I'm really fortunate to work in an environment where the CPE learners that I'm with, CPE stands for Clinical Pastoral Education. We have residents that are with us all year long. We have interns that are with us for either a month or months at a time. And we have post residency learners that will be joining us in the fall. And folks come from all over the world, all different religious backgrounds. And I I want that to exist everywhere where people get to bring their full selves. They get to discern how spirit is calling to them, how life is calling to them, and then have the freedom to explore that in the fullness of who they are. And I want to help facilitate that personal and professional learning in a nonviolent but bold way.
Tell me what, from your perspective, what's the distinction between the nonviolent and bold?
Well, something that I'm really curious about right now, especially as conversations about anti racism are alive in our, not just within our team, but within the nation right now, is this question of safety. And what does it mean to have a quote unquote safe space? Is it even possible? And so I guess I've heard some people say it's not possible. And I'm in a book study group that's focused on embodied trauma for white bodies and bodies of culture, as the author Resma Menachem calls it. And he's like, do you swear on God Talks, or like, what's your policy on that?
Be your complete self.
Okay, I'm going to be my complete self, channeling Resma's complete self when there were 700 some odd people on this Zoom call, and he was setting up the container for this year-long study group. And I'm naming the person's gender and race because it seems important. A white male asked, what about safety in the context of this conversation? And after a long introduction, Resma said, bodies of culture are never safe, and safety is not a prerequisite for doing this work. Join the fucking club. And that landed with me. And yeah, like, what is safety for different people? And when is safety comfort? When is that white supremacy showing up in an educational space, where as a white educator, as a white faculty member in a multiracial, multicultural, multi-religious space, could safety be synonymous with comfort when I want it to be nonviolent, but I want it to be brave?
You said a word that you know I'm going to pick up on,
What's that?
which is comfort.
Yeah.
I think your journey has been, there's been a lot of discomfort in that journey, at least from the outside looking in. You haven't always chosen the most comfortable path. So why? what has sort of pressed you to keep pressing and sort of breaking these barriers, and in many respects giving up your comfort? And if you want to talk a little bit about the transition from being an architect to being a full-time seminarian, but you've given up a lot of comfort to follow this path. Why?
I'm pausing because I'm not sure if I have given up. I mean, in some ways I've given up comfort, and in other ways I haven't. And I just moved to this 215 square foot tiny cottage in someone's backyard. And it's like the intersection of semi monasticism and luxury to me. And I am blissed out. I'm smiling because I'm blissed out. I'm no longer renting a bedroom in somebody else's space. And anyway, I won't go down that path. I fucking love my work. I love this vocation, and it's not always comfortable, but I like who I'm becoming. Uh, and what a privilege to be with people in these spaces, like the spaces of crisis, the spaces of dying, the places of grieving, the place of healing, place of self-discovery, and finding out we were capable of more than we thought we were. And I say we because it includes me. And every day I get to be with students or fellow learners, as we refer to our cohort members. I watch them discover new things about themselves in the face of life and death.
What are some things you've been discovering about yourself?
I'm going to close my eyes for a minute. And other people's anger isn't going to kill me. And that my own anger and other people's anger is really powerful, and nothing I necessarily need to be afraid of, which I was afraid of for a really, really long time. And I think it kept me from more meaningful relationship with myself, more meaningful relationships with other people who were worthy of me having received their anger and see their anger, of sharing my own, having it be a clarifying energy, like a holy fire that can clear distraction away and help me understand what justice might look like, or where justice might be needed when a violation has occurred. And also when someone's trying to use anger to distract me from the truth, I feel like I've become more discerning about that too, and steady in the presence of that. And people get angry at the hospital, including me. Yeah.
I wanted to tap into that and ask you the question of where is the place for anger? I think a lot about James Baldwin sort of talking about, if you are, for instance, a person of color living in this reality, you would
and awake.
be in a rage.
You're a rage all the time.
Like all the time. So for that balance for you, where is that holy anger, where is the place for that in the midst of everything that's happening in the world right now?
Mm-hmm. I guess the place for that, where is not the place for that? And maybe you're wanting me to ask, like, give a couple of specific examples. Sorry about that. I didn't turn off my work phone before we got onto this. Let me see if there. I want to share where I got really angry recently, and I used it. I'm in a consultation group with a bunch of other people who are on this educator path. And we meet every Friday, and someone was getting consultation around a group dynamic, and a woman was really angry about some things that she was experiencing, telling the story. We were watching a video, and someone responded about how sad their anger made them. This woman's anger made them. And I felt like my body, like my cheeks were getting red. I felt my heart beating faster. I sort of leaned forward. And when it came time for me to participate, I said, all of that sadness is a wet blanket on her anger. And I wish you could just let her have it. Like, just meet her there. And it's coming up for me a lot about hearing stories of sexual abuse, which we heard last week in God Talks, violation of boundaries, misuse of power across gender lines and along the gender spectrum, across sexualities, violence between body to body, like white bodies and black bodies and brown bodies. And it's just that we need to tap into our anger, which is energizing. Like that rage that James Baldwin describes is holy. It is sacred. And we don't need any wet blankets on it. We need it to be free to do its job. So my question is not, is it okay to be angry? But like, how do I harness that energy and not burn people with it? That's what I'm trying to learn how to do. Yeah.
So in the midst of that, where is God?
God is the fire.
The ending of God in the midst of that. I mean, more so curious about, like, you know, your understanding of God's call to you to do this work. But then I think extrapolating it to those moments that you're describing, where are you finding God even in that holy anger, that frustration?
Mm-hmm. Pick one of those questions. Like, just one of them that you listed.
Start with, where is God in the midst of that anger? Because I think theologically, for some people, they don't exist. It's why we have the images of what I often describe as the white Jesus, who's sort of vacantly standing there, not a Jesus turning over tables, right? I mean,
that carried a whip.
Right, ready to be like, this is a den of vipers.
Out.
Right. So yeah, I want to talk about, so share a little bit about your vision of God in the midst of that reality, and then I'll come back to sort of how you found God in your call.
Thank you. I need that. I need a little more facilitation. I get lost in the sauce, as one of the learners says. Can I talk about our whole emotional spectrum? I kind of want to back up and say that in chaplaincy, one of the things I feel like I'm called to is I'm not a power of positivity person. I am a positive person. I'm an optimistic person. I have been taught that racism was created. It can be undone. Like in the face of almost anything, I feel like I've been surrounded by people who have infused me with to look for the possibility, for the creative opportunity through collaboration. And I don't believe in just a positivity that focuses away from the fullness of reality, what's really happening, what people are really facing. And oftentimes, I think I can only speak for Christianity, but we have been taught to, I'll use the word whitewash. We've white Jesus, if you want to use that image, a lot of things that I meet a lot of people that are literally on their deathbeds who don't feel they have the freedom to wrestle with the fullness of the human spectrum of emotions, including anger, including grief, including disappointment, including wondering why. And I think when we have access, when I see that people have permission to just go to that very human place that includes everything, like the Holy Spirit comes in and moves things around. And so the visits when I feel the most free, when I feel most free as a human being, it's filled with like laughter and tears, joy and anger. Like I'm feeling like, and I'm picturing like one particular person in the ICU after an emergency transplant surgery who was in like incredible pain. But we were riding this like emotional roller coaster. Like you could feel it moving in the room. And people sometimes need to get angry to act on their own behalf or on the behalf of others. I feel like I kind of got lost, Pastor. Can you come back to ask me that question again? I got lost in the full spectrum of the emotions because I'm so passionate about that. But
Well, I mean, I think it was highlighting sort of where you see God in that. But I also
all of
think
it.
all of it. Yeah, I was gonna say as you were just sort of walking through that,
Yeah,
I was
I'm just like, bring us the human Jesus. Just bring me the human Jesus, the one who wept, the one who carried the whip, the one who asked people to put down the swords, and the one who drove people out of the temple. Like all of that, all of that, all of that, all of that. The Jesus that was anointed for burial by the woman at Bethany, the woman who wept over or the part of him that wept over Jerusalem. It just, that full spectrum of human emotion was present in him. It's what makes him my primary wisdom teacher. And when I feel something human in me, I usually look to the gospel stories and say, where does this exist? He is imperfect to me, which I know is like blasphemy to a lot of people, but that his willingness to learn from the Canaanite woman or the Syrophoenician woman, to change his mind, to learn in public, to receive feedback, to give a really shitty response to her, and then be called on it and change his mind in that moment is inspiring to me. And I see God in that.
which leads me to God and you. And and I we have some time, so I would love for you to share a little bit about your journey to chaplaincy in particular. But if you could highlight some moments where you truly felt the presence of God in that call towards your current vocation.
Mm-hmm. This is like a love story for me to tell this story. I think all people have a multiple love stories to tell. It's part of why I love my job, is that I get to listen to them. I get to ask about them, about what they love and who they love and what they feel called to love. And for me, I've always loved listening to people. And I love to talk, I love to share, but I've always loved to listen to people. But I, or, and, I never knew spiritual direction existed. Like I joke with you that these are public spiritual direction conversations, but I didn't know what that was. But I met my friend, Sarah Murphy Kangas, and she taught me like what spiritual direction was, that she had a spiritual director and she thought I would be interested in it. And I was 30 years old. So 15 years ago, it'll be 16 years ago in a couple weeks, where I discovered there was this person that you could go and meet with, usually once a month, who would listen to you talk about all of your life, where you were finding meaning in it, what you were wrestling with, what you were longing for, through the perspective of how is it with your soul? That's the question that, since we both know Suzanne, that's the question that Suzanne would always start with. Like, not what's on your agenda or what are you doing or what's up in your life, but how is it with your soul right now? And I met with her for 9 years. And sometimes we would start our sessions with the gospel readings, doing Lectio Divina, which means like a slow, multiple readings of the same passage and then be in dialogue around what we are hearing. And at that time, I was an architect. Like when I started meeting with her, I had been in architecture for a long time. But I felt like there was something more, like something else I was being called to, but I didn't know what it was. And meeting with her for 5+ years into my time of meeting with her, I was finally ready to make a shift. But I remember the very first time I met with her, she told me that she was the retreat leader for this thing called the Academy for Spiritual Formation. And there was something in me that said, I want to do this. And so 1 week every 3 months for 2 years, I went away to a retreat center and lived this semi-monastic rhythm with a group of about 40 or 50 other people. And through that program, we had to pick something to do. The first year of the program was focused internally. The second year of the program, we started to shift externally. And where were we called to serve? And I started becoming a learning partner with folks who were incarcerated through this organization called Justice Works. And the folks who were incarcerated would take classes, and they were looking for people to talk with, like be conversation partners about what they were learning about themselves through the classes they were taking. So I started doing that and developed some really, one in particular, deep relationship. I got to visit that, like participate at a party when that person was released from prison, and be exposed to doing things like showing up to be a court observer with Justice Works, and continually felt called to this intersection of spirituality and justice. And outside of Justice Works, then I became involved with Shanti, and that was a program of the now closed Multi-Faith Works. But their program, the Inmate Support Project, I got trained to be an emotional support volunteer at the King County Jail. And so for almost 4 years, I went and listened to people for hours at a time. And it changed my life to sit with them and to hear what was on their mind, to hear what they cared about. And I thought, I want to do this more. I want to do this more often. And I really want to pray with these folks, but I can't offer that to them unless they ask for it. And so there was this little, this part of me that just, like a whisper from the Holy Spirit that said, just keep going, like just keep asking that question. And so during that time, I found myself asking, what does it take to become a chaplain? Yeah. I could get lost in that story and like picturing all the people I met along the way, and a couple people that I met with at the jail. There's several people that stick with me, but I'm kind of picturing them right now. So I'm here with you, but I'm also not. I'm thinking about those conversations and the paradox of really enjoying that work and feeling privileged, but kind of tearing up now thinking, I don't celebrate that reality for anyone. I don't think it heals anyone. I don't think it heals our society. I don't think it keeps us safer. A jail is not meant to be a prison for people, but a jail often serves that. People end up serving really long sentences, far longer than they should be there, often because they can't pay their bail, not because they've done anything wrong. And I don't even like to distinguish between like doing wrong and not doing wrong, although it's important in some aspects, no matter what someone's done, I don't think our system, our prison industrial complex is serving us communally or individually. And what makes me tear up the most is watching people's human features change, like watching their pigment change from lack of exposure to sunlight, watching their bodies change from malnutrition, their minds, their brilliant minds start to fade from lack of contact, especially in a jail that doesn't have as many programs as a prison. So at the same time that experience called me deeper into chaplaincy, it also, I guess I would describe myself now as an abolitionist, like that I just don't believe we need the system that we have to keep us safe. And it is killing people inside out and outside in, including the people that work there. Much like white supremacy, I've internalized it. It's harming me as much, but differently. That's an important distinction. Differently than it harms Black people, brown people, Indigenous people, but still it is robbing me and other white folks of our humanity too. In the same way, I think the prison system is harming the humanity of the people who work there.
I wanted to just let that sink in because I think we only think about one side of it, but I think it's important to understand that these systems actually are endangering every person involved to varying degrees, but it's there. You know, you said something, Emily, that was really powerful that I have two questions in my mind, but I'll give you just one to start with. You talked about, you know, wanting to pray, but then realizing you can't unless you're asked, and then hearing the Spirit tell you, but keep going.
Yeah.
What in your history didn't have you just shoo that voice away and go, well, that's just me talking. Like, that's just me wanting to be in this, but truly be able to differentiate, oh, no, that's
and you
the
know
Holy
what?
Spirit.
Like the Holy Spirit, God, that is my voice. That's not all I am. You know, the deepest me is God, as St. Catherine of Genoa would say, but I am not God. That's the paradox I'm always trying to hold. The deepest me is the Holy Spirit, but I am not all of the Holy Spirit. So I can recognize that voice because it is mine. And so you can recognize that voice because it's yours. And the same way that I feel confident asking patients or fellow staff members or learners, like, what's your inner teacher say? Like, that's a phrase that's up for me right now, and something we refer to. I hope as an educator that eventually that the voice of, I'm going to use the word student, although we try not to use that word too much because we are fellow learners, but in the role that I have as an educator in training, how am I sitting with the person really who's learning to trust the voice of their inner teacher so much that they will not need me anymore? And that is Jesus to me, who is walking with everyone he met, asking them to tune into that voice inside of them. And soon he would be gone and he would be no longer with them. And he was always thinking about that. Who are you going to be? How are you going to be together when I'm not here? We're not always going to have each other, but we have each other right now. So in my life, sorry, I went down that path because that's an important one. My mom, like both of my biological parents. I have three parents. I have my mom, my biological mom, and my mom that's still very present in my life. My stepdad, who I consider my second parent, and then I have my biological father, who was my dad for the first half of my life, and imprinted me in a lot of ways that we're not currently in a relationship. But both of my biological parents, like my mom is always talking to God. Like, so she trusted that part of herself, and I witnessed that. And I guess it caused me to trust that part of myself. This happens a lot with us, and I just want to check in right now with you that being with you sometimes makes me really quiet. Like, when we're in a group together, when we're at church together, I get really loud. But but this happens where, why I refer to this as public spiritual direction is I feel myself getting really quiet. Like I'm kind of internal right now. And I'm thinking about a story I tell a lot, like, writing all these papers to get into these different programs and reflect on my life. But one that really sticks out to me is I was raised in the United Methodist Church, and when we would take communion, after we received it, you could kneel at the communion rail. And I love to do that. Like, I love to kneel at the rail and just have quiet time. And but there was one time when I was in high school, and it was during the time where my parents were headed for divorce, but we weren't, like, that wasn't public information at the church, and we weren't really talking about it outside of our family home. But I just remember this utter feeling of just like rest at the rail, and just having this really quiet but sense of communion, like I was unburdening myself. And I trust that. Like, I trust that ongoing conversation with life, that stillness that happens. And right now I'm thinking it's less than, sometimes I do get these phrases. I do hear like a voice say something to me. But sometimes it's just like a knowing of the next right thing to do. Or a consolation. One of my favorite scriptures is, "I will not leave you as orphaned." And that has been true for me all of my life. Even when I've been at my saddest, at my lowest, I haven't felt alone. Yeah.
I want to hold on to and ask you to shift gears, but I want you to speak into people who are listening. That's a very powerful statement to align that voice, the voice of the spirit, is actually your own voice. I mean, it's a higher level of theological connection that I think most of us are socialized to even believe is possible.
Yeah.
There's such a distancing from
Yeah.
the divine.
A
Even in the way I asked the question was a distancing. Like, well, Emily, so what do you say to someone who isn't where you are yet? Or maybe that isn't even something they've ever contemplated. That kind of intimacy with God, I don't want you to give permission, but how do you give an invitation to think about that without the distancing that we're often taught and the deep connection that you've just shared with us? Because somebody's watching this like, what you talking about?
Get over yourself. Either what are you talking about or get over yourself. One of the two. I'm such a contextual person. Like, I'd want to know, why don't they believe that's possible for them? Or maybe, we're trained not to ask why, we're trained to ask what. What would it be like to trust that your voice is a part of the voice of God? That's what I would ask them. what would it be like? So for anybody that's listening, what would it be like for you to believe your voice is a part of the voice of God? Your voice is a representation of wisdom. That mostly it comes down to trust, and we're taught, I think all of us are taught, but I have originally thought, speaking of myself as a woman, I'm taught not to trust myself. Looking at you, I'm thinking, as a Black man, are you taught to trust yourself? As people who identify as queer or lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, I wasn't taught to trust myself. I wasn't taught to trust my sense of my own sexuality as a young person. And so for me, it's a reclaiming of trust that God, the universe, life knew what life was doing when it created me.
Okay, I just love that you have sort of these drop the mic statements, and then I'm still waiting for the. And you're like, oh
You
no,
wanted
baby,
to,
that was it. The mic has been dropped.
I I could talk about this forever. Um, my CPE educator is somebody in my life who's changing my life, and I'm aware of it when I'm with them. And so, what I'm pausing for right now is not everybody is lucky enough to spend, in this training program in CPE. If you're full time, you get to meet with your educator once a week for what's called individual supervision for an hour. And it's like a strange alchemy mixture of spiritual direction, mentoring. It's like anything I've ever experienced. And I happen to have an educator who, like, trust is big for him. So he will say, I trust you, go try something new. And it makes me, his commitment to freedom, his own and everyone else's, makes me so uncomfortable. It makes me so uncomfortable. But he trusts, like, you go into the wilderness here, and I trust you to find your way out. And so that kind of being in that space of trust, I want to say I'm starting. Do I already have it? Now I look at people and it's changing me to feel like I trust you. Like, I trust the patient I'm with. I trust their knowing. I trust their inner wisdom. I trust their inner teacher. And that facilitating that kind of connection is way more important than them connecting to some, like, I feel like doing air quotes, or they don't need me to be an expert. What are they going to do when they leave the hospital? If they're more connected to that place in them when they leave, that's my hope. And that I might get to participate in that is what an honor. Um, so, spacing on her name right now. She's in Blackish. Is it Jennifer Lewis? Do you know who I'm talking about? The mother of Black Hollywood? Is that her? So I saw this interview with her that just blew me away. She's so confident, and she just loves the shit out of life, and she has no secrets. She tells all about herself all the time. And people are magnetically attracted to her. And she tells this story about people coming up to her and just like, I wish I could be like you. Like, how did you get to be like this? And she said to somebody, if it's in you, if you can see it in me. It's in you if you can see it in me. So I've said that to patients. I've said that to, I'm saying that to whoever is listening or watching right now and thinking, who are you, Emily, to think that your voice is the voice of God, or that that kind of intimacy is a possible, is possible and already a reality for everyone. It's in you if you can see it in me.
I was wondering, Emily, about you are present in the hospital, and you have been present when so many families have not been able to connect with their loved ones. What has that experience been like for you? Kind of holding the helping people discover what's on the inside of them and not,
Mm-hmm.
sort of projected into you. But you are kind of that person. You are the
Oh,
one
for
who's
sure. I
there
have to
sitting in
take
the
that on.
room.
Yeah.
Just what has that experience been like for you,
Mm-hmm.
holding space in that
Mm-hmm.
way?
I'm pausing for a minute, like just reflecting on like an experience I can call up. Right now in my role, I don't spend as much time on the floors. I don't spend as much time on the patient units. But I did recently work an on-call shift, and it's been just recent, just a week ago. So I'm just remembering a young person having a stroke and dying a week later. And their family being able to be present, which is different than I think what you're referring to right now. Is the during the pandemic, we've had different times when no visitors could be present. Right now, we have a visitor restriction where there can be two different people every day, one person at a time, but there's like a very strict protocol around what that looks like, how many times they can leave the room, how many times they can go to the bathroom. Like, it's very particular. And I'll say at the very beginning of the pandemic restrictions, it's devastating. I think that's what I'm talking around right now. Is it's devastating and it's heartbreaking, to whether it's due to COVID-19 or it's due to families being separated from by immigration policy, and it's devastating to it's a devastating privilege. It's a sad privilege. I say that phrase so many times when people thank me for being present. And I think death is holy. I don't think it's a punishment. Um, I I'm just going to say it without trying to edit it or couch it, but it is an honor to be present when people are dying. And it's different for me because I'm not their family member and I'm not their loved one. So to hold space for other people, I I'm thinking two things, like I can do that for somebody else. I'm wired in such a way that I can be in that space, and then I get to do that. What a privilege to be in the space where I get to witness people saying goodbye, whether that's over the phone, whether that's in person, whether that's their loved one is no longer visibly responsive to them, but I'm talking to them from another state and saying, would you like to talk to your loved one over the phone? I could hold it up to their ear and then listen to them sob. Um, I am in service to people, doing like helping that connection happen in whatever way I can.
The question that came up for me, which I want to ask, because it's just there.
Yeah.
Yeah. How are you finding life in the midst of death?
Mm.
Or I guess even a little bit more contextual for the transition you've made now. How have you found
Mm-hmm.
life? in the midst of death?
At the end of my residency year, when I was coming on for my last on-call shift, I was listening to a Dharma talk with Natalie Goldberg, who's a writing teacher, but she's a Zen practitioner. And I was listening to her on the Upaya podcast, and she was talking about walk when you're walking, eat when you're eating, die when you're dying. And I just started weeping walking into the hospital, like getting choked up about, I cannot articulate. I don't have words to articulate the effect it has had on me, especially my first and second years in the hospital, to be so close to the reality of our mortality. I'm not just like being with people who are dying, being with people at their moment of death, being with the family members, and sometimes sitting on the bed. Like I'm thinking of one pair of parents and sitting on the bed of their young adult daughter and having them show me pictures and tell me stories. And I cannot take my life for granted. That's what it's done for me. That's what I find my life is just, it sounds like a cliche. I won't be the first person to say this. I won't be the last, but it's like a bell rings in me every time I'm in that situation. If it's emergent and like a code, or it's expected and at the end of a long battle with something, and I hate that phrase, battle, a long journey with cancer, I still feel like I walk out the door of the hospital. I can smell the air. I can feel the breeze on my skin. I can look at the sky. I can hear people talking. And I just think, I'm alive and I don't want to waste it. I'm thinking, can I tell another story? I'm looking at the time and there's, every now and again, I get called to talk with somebody or pray with somebody before they go for a transplant surgery, which is pretty risky, but also could save their life, and just like complex emotions involved all the time. And I remember being called to meet with somebody like right before they were going into surgery, and it was such a meaningful visit. And I said, I'll try to come and see you if you're on the other side of this. And I went to see them. I saw their name on the census a couple days later, and I went to see them, and this person could see me walking down the hall, and she stretched out her arms to me, and she just started crying, and she just kept saying over and over again, I'm alive, I'm alive, I'm alive, I'm alive, I'm alive. And it was so surprising to her. It was such a joy to her that she made it to the other side through the donation of somebody else's life and death. Through their death, she had life. And to see somebody before and to meet her afterwards and be a witness to that testimony, how could I not say the same thing every day when I get up? Stretch out my arms like you see me do at Liberation, like it's all church, as Rob Bell says, it's all the temple. Like, it's incredible.
Thank you for that. I think having the privilege of hearing how you've been walking through this journey has been a gift. So I just wanted people to be able to hear just some of that. As we are coming to our closing time, I have a couple more questions
Yeah.
to kind of round off, and then of course I want to offer you a blessing. Um, this God whose voice is yours and yours is God's. This God
A
who
piece of God's, yeah.
this piece of God who spoke to you and told you to keep going.
Mm.
This spirit that I think is with you when you are in each room and when you're with the other educators and when you are educating and holding space for people. How are you keeping that relationship vibrant and alive at this point in your life?
Like 1,000 different ways.
Yeah.
Let me pick a couple. Mm. One thing that's become like bedrock for me is a daily meditation practice. And I laugh because when I first started seeing Suzanne for spiritual direction, that was literally 1 minute a day. Like it was 1 minute a day. So I want to say to anybody who thinks that they can't do it, like who has 10 minutes, who has 20 minutes, who has 30 minutes, like just start small. Like start with a minute, one good minute, you know. You weren't asking me that. You weren't asking me to tell other people this is when the educator comes out. I want to spread it. It's changed my life. So I do that. And now it's a lot longer than 1 minute, but it really helps me just, how can I let life go on without me and trust I can join back into that river when the timer goes off? How can that helps me slow down. Like literally in the most extreme in a code, or now like I don't go to a lot of codes anymore, but students call me when they're on call and they're in the midst of something that's going on, and my job is to slow down, and it's to help them slow down. And I can't do that if I'm not paying attention. Like if I'm not strengthening that relationship through stillness, then I will just be in this reactionary, anxious, stressed out mode. And I used this analogy. I feel like our country is in a code right now, and it is a matter of life and death. So it is worthy of the urgency. It is worthy of the urgency. But if we don't know how to pace ourselves and work as a team, if we don't know how to tap into that inner stillness that is accessible to us at all times in all places in the midst of the urgent activity around us that is about people's lives, we will burn ourselves and each other out. That's the number one thing I do.
Oh, I love that invitation to not burn each other out, and the consciousness of it. Emily, one of the other ways that you're connected is to the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond. And that's kind of going across the ticker so that people might join you in making a donation. Will you say a little bit more about that organization as we close?
Mm-hmm. I'm trying to remember how I found out about them. Might be through our fellow UCC chaplain, and I'm not sure if she's ordained yet or approved for ordination, but Jen Hagedorn. She I think, is the person who taught me, exposed the People's Institutes for Survival and Beyond to me. They do, I think their core offering is a 2-day undoing institutional racism workshop that I participated in Seattle. I think it was 2014. And it changed me. Like it changed the way I thought about things. Dr. Kim was one of the educators who was there. They always have two teaching teams. And she said something to me. I answered a question incompletely and incorrectly about the Tuskegee experiment. And she didn't shame me. And I went up to her afterwards and I said, "Thank you for not shaming me. I pretended like I knew more than I did know. And my unknowing was exposed in the group, but you didn't shame me with it. And I appreciate that." And she said to me, "You need to move from the veneer to get to the wood," inviting me to go from the surface to the core of things. And I learned what it meant to trade in the culture of my own ethnicities. I'm of German and Dutch heritage, for whiteness. Like I learned that through that program. And so I want to lift them up. I mean, I'm an educator that's still pulling from the way that they sewed into me the way they educated me. My education continues. I'm still unlearning and I'm still learning. But they also believe in the core, like to the core of themselves and in their bones, that racism was created. Race was created out of the societal construct of race. Or they believe it can be undone. Because they believe it can be undone, I have to believe it too and work for that. So I would love to see them supported, and I would love to match people's donations. If you are listening and you make a donation to the People's Institute, please let me know, and I would love to match your donations to this organization.
Thank you, Emily. And there's so much that you said tonight that I'm still ruminating on, and I feel like I'm gonna go back and watch, and I hope I invite other people to do so too. We always end God Talks with a blessing or an affirmation, and I try to be attuned to the voice of the Spirit, which is part of my own voice, and that my I'm
Yes,
gonna
it
start
is.
saying that everywhere I go. I'm almost there. I almost got the quote right. Um, the word. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I just, I just want to thank you. I know you're going to bless me, and I'm going to let you have the last word. But I saw your little introduction and your memory. But I want to thank you for being a teacher in my life,
Mm.
for being an educator. I quote you every week. My educator quotes you every week now. Plus one. Emily, what's their plus one? Not their plus 10. Like, um, thank you for having a heart for multicultural community.
Mm.
Thank you for having a heart for multiracial community. Thank you for having a heart for the truth, a commitment to prophetic speak. Um, you continue to love white people. I just want to say that. And I'm one of them.
Thank you
That
for that.
that's not free.
Mm.
That comes at a cost.
Thank you for acknowledging that. Of course, my natural joking self wanted to be like, "Girl, you're white." I just found out. um, Emily, the imagery that I have actually is fascinating that you just said that, because the imagery I have is very indicative of the Black church. And a seminal figure in the Black church is the church usher. And the church usher is the one who knows where there's room. They know where to sit. They know where to direct you. Effectively, they know how to invite you in to be a part of the experience. They've been watching it. They are aware of everything that's kind of happening, and they can give you the code of where exactly to go. May you claim your role as the usher, ushering not only people to a space of belonging, to a space of finding their voice, to a space of understanding that there is belonging for them, even if they have to be the ones to create it. I invite you to accept the call of the usher, because sometimes the usher is welcoming people into different experiences. Maybe you are the one welcoming people into death as we know it, into a life that they couldn't have imagined that is to come. You are a person who ushered us all in just a little bit ago into an ordination that I can admit, and for many people who watched along, it was transformative to see an ordination of someone who had brought together varying traditions, ecumenical and interfaith. People from your charismatic, thank you Jesus, church, to people who meditate alongside you, to folks whose spiritual direction is their connection to the divine. And yet we were all there singing and clapping and worshiping and being meditatively present, because you ushered us in to an experience that maybe we couldn't have seen before. So, In the black church, there's a little pin that you get that says usher. I might send you one. So then when you go into the hospital, you just have your little usher pin. Somebody says, "Who am I?" You say, "I am Emily, the usher." And they don't have to understand what that means. But my blessing for you is that you continue to do that. So love you very much.
Love you too.
And I will take you out and then stay with me. I'll be back. Friends, thank you so much for watching God Talks tonight and accompanying me with Chaplain Reverend Emily Linderman. I hope that you found some of what Emily shared tonight to be a blessing to you, and that you will share God Talks, and particularly this conversation with Emily, with other folks. Join me again next week on Monday night at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. Our interviewee is going to be the Reverend Teresa Howard Owens, who's the General Minister and President of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. So I'm excited to have her and know that she will offer some great wisdom and invitation to you all. So see you next week. And don't forget, if you're still seeing that ticker, join Emily and me in donating to Undoing Racism, the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond. Have a blessed Monday night.